Hi, this is Real World Audio, and I'm looking at the perhaps the most iconic loudspeaker of all time, Focal's Grande Utopia. And this is something truly special, as it has been basically the Utopia, the last frontier of high-end loudspeakers for the past 3 decades or so, because it's been in production for about that long. And as far as I can remember, even in 2000, when I was a fledgling audiophile, even at that time, the Focal Grand Utopia was really the end of all audiophile dreams. That's what we all dreamed about. And for those who like me are in the United States, you might not know that much about Focal because it's a European brand, but basically what is here in the United States Wilson Audio, in Europe that's Focal. So basically the Wilson Audio Max, the Chronosonic models, these are equivalent to the Focal Grand Utopias. And when we are thinking about ultra high-end loudspeakers in people's imagery, in Europe that's the Grand Utopia, and in the United States it's the Wilson Audio. And when you have a look at them, they have the same structure, the same harmonica leaning tower of pizza like solution, that they have basically the multitude of drivers in a curved configuration. And basically, okay, before I go any further into this, I will say that this is not a review of the Focal Grand Utopia, not something that you are used to. If you want a review, you can look at, for example, the hi-fi-news.com. Look at Hi-Fi News, and that's where I got the picture for this analysis. What I am going to provide here is a different view. I'm going to tell you perspectives that were not explored for the Grand Utopia, and will bring up issues that I have not heard any reviewer and any newspaper or magazine bring up, but yet I think they are truly key and crucial to understand what these loudspeakers are doing and what they can offer for you. And before I'm going to go into any more of that, I can tell you guys that those who have not heard focals, these big focals, or their cousins, their American cousins, the big Wilson Audios, that these are truly spectacular sounding speakers. And I know that a lot of people are trying to diss them because they cost insane amounts of money. And I have made a lot of videos about Wilson Audio loudspeakers, and some of you have the impression that I have been dissing them. No, not at all. That was never my point. If you just take one or two things that I have said out of context, then yes, that might seem like this thing. But overall, my impression of both the Wilson Audios and the Focal is that they are truly impressive sounding, and about 80% of people who hear them will say that that was the most amazing sound they heard in their lives. And 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 that's unquestionable. However, now let's go into my pilgrimage, an analysis of how these speakers work, what they do, what are the technological aspects that are used to produce certain aspects of the sound. And I'm not going to go into every tiny detail, every single technological aspect, because that would take days. What now I'm going to focus about are those aspects which are getting neglected by the audio community, but I think they are critical and crucial. So I'm going to focus on those and not on those features that most reviewers and most magazines have focused on. So if you want to hear about those aspects, then go and look up those reviews. And if you have questions about the aspects I have brought up, then fly away and put them in the comments. So let's go. So according to Foca's claims, these loudspeakers are 94 dB sensitive. So that's why I said in my opening lines that finally there's high efficiency, high sensitivity loudspeakers at the top of the high-end world, and that's just amazing. Are we seeing a turn of the tide? Because what we have seen during the past 30-40 years is that high-end products are getting lower and lower in their efficiency or sensitivity ratings. And some of you think that that's not an issue, because all that means is that you need higher and higher power amplifiers to drive them, and if you just give them that higher power, you will have the exact same result as you would have a higher sensitivity loudspeaker with a lower power amplifier, but you are getting also a greater level of control, because higher power amplifiers have higher level of control. Now, I'm going to spend time on looking at the sensitivity of the Grande Utopia EM Evo, and also going to spend a little bit of time going into the things about the dynamics and control. But that would require a much longer time to explore, and I have thoroughly done it in some of my previous videos, so you can go back and check those out. However, let's now focus on the sensitivity of the Grande Utopia EM Evo. This is the 2018 model, and that was claimed to be 94 dB sensitive, and that's the point where our happiness ends when we and excitement ends when we read that it was rated at 2.83 volt. So it's not dB per watt meter rating, but when you read dB per watt meter rating, that means you are getting the honest truth. When you are getting that at 2.83 volt rating, now you should start being really beware and sit at the edge of your seat, because there's a huge issue with that. The 2.83 volt rating will only give you accurate sensitivity value when the impedance of the loudspeaker is 8 ohms. And they say, okay, it's an 8 ohms loudspeaker. So now you sit back on the couch and relax that, okay, so it's truly 94 dB sensitive. But you read with a dip. When you read with a dip to the 8 ohms rating, then you can kiss those 8 ohms goodbye. Because you have to read further. How far is that dip? Because if that dip is down to, let's say, to 7 ohms, then it's an 8 ohms loudspeaker. But if it's like dip to 5 ohms or 4 ohms, now that's now not an 8 ohm loudspeaker anymore. It's a 4 ohm loudspeaker basically. And however, the problem with these Focas is that they dip even lower, and they specify that they dip to 3 ohms. Guys, you know what that means? An 8 ohm loudspeaker that dips to 3 ohms. That is a 4 ohm loudspeaker. So, and there we have a problem, because if it's a 4 ohm loudspeaker rated at this rating, it's not, the efficiency is not 94 dB. So there's something going fishy, and we have to look into the matter. And the problem is that it gets me to high efficiency speaker dynamic range. This is not true anymore. So I'm going to go to hifinews.com, and you look at their measurements, because they have measured it, and their measurements say that is just 91 dB sensitive. So it's 3 dB lower than what Focal claims. And this is why we have magazines like Hi-Fi News and Stereophile, because they have unbiased measuring teams, measuring capability, where they measure for themselves what is the sensitivity rating. And that's because each company has their own method of measuring sensitivity, and probably that's true for them, and that's accurate because that's the system they use. But each company uses their own system, and ultimately it's the customer who has to make the call. And when you have a magazine who measures like a vast array of different brands, like hundreds of different brands, and they have their own standard, I recommend for everyone to go with the measurements that the magazines read, because those are comparable between different brands. If you stick to only Focal's measurements, then they apply only between the different Focal models, but they do not offer you comparison between different loudspeaker brands. Okay? So now we are going to read further, because first I thought that Hi-Fi News, they measured it 91 dB because of the 8.83 volt rating, or maybe they counted in the dip. But then it turned out that they made the sensitivity rating at 2.83 volts. So it was not a conversion to the wattmeter rating from this rating, but they kept the 2.83 volt rating, and it's lower than that. And they also measured the impedance dip, and that was even much lower than Focal specified. They specified only 3 ohms, and the actual measurement was under 2 ohms. So with the 1.9 ohm dip, that calculates to a 2.4 ohm nominal impedance, because that's how the nominal impedance is calculated, that the minimum where it drops is 80% of the nominal impedance. So if you want to calculate the nominal impedance of any loudspeaker, then the minimum is at the 80% of the nominal. So you can calculate the nominal impedance from the dip. And it turns out that this is a 2.4 ohm loudspeaker, which is as far from an 8 ohm loudspeaker that they have specified as you can imagine. That's like from here to Pluto, okay? That's the difference between a 2.4 ohm and an 8 ohm specification. It's kind of like you specify that you are selling a personal vehicle, and in reality it's an asphalt making machine, you know, those heavy construction machines. That's the difference between those two values. And basically what that means is that when we are driving this loudspeaker with a 2.83 volt signal, then we get 91 dB sensitivity. However, to reach that, we need much more than 1 watt to create that 91 dB. And using that 2.4 ohm nominal impedance, we can calculate that it takes us 3.33 watts to reach that 91 dB output. So, converting it to dB per watt meter measurement, it is a thoroughly disappointing 85.8 dB per watt meter sensitivity. So basically it turns out that the claim that it's 94 dB sensitive, it's as far from reality as sadly as anyone could imagine. It's not a high efficiency loudspeaker, it's an average efficiency loudspeaker. So it's not high efficiency, sorry guys, but this is what the measurements say. And when you want to get to the honest truth about sensitivity, you have to look at the watt meter result, and that's when you get, that's what you can compare between two loudspeakers. Because when you get the data at 2.83 volts, then depending on where it dips, what is the actual impedance, actual nominal, true nominal impedance of the loudspeaker, the true efficiency rating will be wildly different from what they specify at this. So how is this happening and why? I will make a special video on that so that we can all imagine and understand it, what's going on there. So that's the actual efficiency or sensitivity, and what the team measured, what Hi-Fi News measured, is that the low frequency extension goes to 39 Hz at minus 6 dB. That's a little bit disappointingly too high for a loudspeaker of this gargantuan size and outrageously expensive price range. And many of you will clutch your hearts that, oh my god, I have been cheated of the lowest octave. How can this happen? But you can be rest assured that these will not sound wimpy. And that is partly because they have a really large size woofer, and that big diameter woofer ensures that you have a really full mid-bass sound, and the frequencies going down to 40 hertz will be very prominent and very very nicely reproduced. And the other thing, that it is much wider, the front baffle is much wider than we are used to, those skinny loudspeakers which are trendy today. The wide front baffle guarantees you a much better perception of full bodiness. And because of their sheer size, wide front baffle, large driver diameter, you will get a very big picture projected by speakers, and their bass will be just much more impressive than just getting maybe a pair of bookshelf speakers and a nice tiny compact subwoofer that can get you down to 20 hertz. Yup, with that kind of setup you will measure much lower frequency expansion, but it will sound like a flea compared to a full-bodied singer. So do not diss it just because the measurements do not conform to what we would expect, or what the industry just preconditions us to expect from big loudspeakers. And now I'm looking at one aspect, which is the lung size of the loudspeaker, because basically when you look at the size of a loudspeaker, the lung size is basically the free air volume that you get for your bass driver. And the bigger your lung size, your free air volume, the deeper it can go down in frequency reproduction and higher in dynamics. So basically, what this translates to in real life, the bigger your lung size, the bigger the loudspeaker, the more impressive and fuller sounding and live sounding the bass will become. And based on the size, the dimensions of the Grande Utopia, I estimated that it's even with heavy bracing, you can have 120 to 150 liters of lung size, and that just holds tremendous possibility of low end extension and efficiency. And because even when we look at a measly 100-liter lungs volume, free air volume, you can get extension down to 30 hertz at minus 6 dB at an 89-90 dB efficiency. And here what we are getting is that it has a size of a much capacity for a much bigger lung size than that 100-liter allows, and we are still getting much lower efficiency, and the bass is not getting anywhere near where it could get. So what on earth is going on? Because guys, maybe you know already, maybe you don't, but the efficiency and bass response are dictated by physics. So the frequency extension and the efficiency at which it is reproduced is directly related to the free air volume, to the lung size, and you can just calculate it from there. And there's no way cheating around this, because it's part of the laws of physics. And here what we are getting, basically that efficiency and the extension, it suggests us a realistic lung size of no bigger than 70 liters. So basically what you are seeing here, it's not a gigantic cabinet, but it's a tiny cabinet. My small two-way Mirage 760, which is just a kid in comparison to these speakers, has a much bigger free air volume than this gigantic Grande Utopia has. So that's something that I just at first, thinking as a loudspeaker engineer, I cannot even conceive of why someone would sacrifice bass response in such a manner, because they have the driver capability, driver capacity to get much better than that. So essentially, when I look at that lung size, this not the lung size, but the total size of the loudspeaker, look at that per data, it's over 2 meters tall, so it's like 6'5" tall, 2 feet wide, almost 3 feet deep, and that's a total of over 1,000 liter volume that it takes up from your room. So basically a single tower takes up as much space as 2 chest freezers. Okay guys, so I think now you can grasp the scale of these speakers, and with that size, it allows you 800 liters of free air volume or more, and that allows you to build a loudspeaker that goes down to 40 hertz and have ultimate 110 dB per watt meter dynamics. So this free air volume that this size speaker holds can give you life-like dynamic range. And what we are having here is not even 1% of that dynamic range which we can get from this size. And I think we will continue our exploration from here at the next part, because our time is up. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope it was illuminating, and we shall continue from here. Please like, subscribe. Bye bye.